Okay, hello folks. This is Ed, the Blue Tractor Guy from the Tractor Place in New Hampshire. And today we're going to give you a quick walk around, hopefully just a few minutes, to show you how to do your first 50-hour service check. Most important thing you've got to help you with this is your operator's manual. Now this tractor is an older one. This is an XR 4046. This is a 4-cylinder naturally aspirated tractor. We use this ourselves. I use this to help maintain most of my properties. In your owner's manual, you're going to have a page for your 50-hour check, and it's going to give you all the things you need to check for that. One of the most important things is the page just before it. It's going to give you lubricants and capacities. I've made a few notes on this one. So engine coolant, you're going to use a coolant that can be mixed with any, or you want a long life coolant, and it can be mixed with any color. That's really what you're after. Fuel, everybody has probably been told already, ultra low sulfur diesel fuel. So if you're not using over-the-road fuel out of the pump, make sure if you're using off-road fuel that it is ultra low sulfur. Engine oil. We recommend Shell Rotella 10W30 diesel rated. Can be bought at Tractor Supply, Advanced, any of the other auto parts stores. Everybody will pretty much carry this. We do not recommend using the 530 unless it's winter time in a really cold environment, and we do not recommend using 1540, and we definitely do not recommend using a 540. I know I've seen other videos and comments where people say I just use an oil that'll cover the entire spectrum of operating temperature. That's not how oils are designed. Multi-viscosity oil, when you start the tractor cold, it acts like a 10-weight oil. And then when the tractor gets up to operating temperature, it acts as a 30-weight oil. So the 10W30 is perfect for the New England operating temperatures that we have. And because the new engines, especially the 4100 series, 3100 series and larger, they have common rail direct injection, really tight tolerances on all the bearings and cranks and stuff inside the engine. And the 40 weight oil at operating temperature, unless you're running at 110, 120, 130 degree outside temperature, 40 weight is just too thick. It cannot lubricate the engine properly. So don't think you're doing the tractor any favor by using a wide spectrum engine oil. Use one that fits for the operating temperature, even if you have to change it to different viscosities each season. Transmission oil. These tractors have one sump in the rear axle that holds all the oil for the hydraulic oil for the entire tractor, and that includes for the hydrostatic transmission. So do not use a universal tractor fluid. They only have a 32 weight rating, and as you can see in your owner's manual, it says use either 46 or 68. Now we recommend an AW anti-wear 46 weight, and again you can get this pretty much anywhere. The 32 weight on a universal tractor fluid is thin enough that you can burn out your hydrostatic unit, so we do not recommend it. Front axle oil, again this shows an 80 weight. You can use an 80-90, and grease, any good grease is fine. And again, right there at the bottom gives you your operating range. So from 14 degrees Fahrenheit up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 10W30 is the recommended oil. Perfect for New England. So that's what we should be doing. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to do an engine oil change. Here is the dipstick on this one. Your dipstick is probably going to be on the same side even on a 4100 series, but it's going to be a little bit straighter, a little bit further back. Well, we're going to look down here. Let's see if we can get to our down underneath. We have an oil pan, and the oil pan has two drain plugs in it.
I believe that the 4100 series, the drain plugs are on the side, and I have one of those in the shop. I can probably go in and get that on there. But anyway, because the drive shaft for the front axle goes through the middle of the oil pan, it's split in half. Very important to make sure that when you fill up your oil, you fill it right up to the full mark and keep it there. Every time you fuel up, you should be double checking to make sure the oil is right up to the full mark. And on the new series tractors, it's okay to be a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch over the full mark. Do not let it get down to the fill, to the low mark, because then the oil is not transferring over the top of that 2-part oil pan, and you can actually have oil starvation, which could burn up your turbocharger. Now this tractor actually has its oil fill on this side with a yellow plug on it. The newer 4100 series, it's going to be on the opposite side of the tractor, and it's going to have a rubber push-in cap, and it's not going to say anything. It's just going to be a black cap on that timing cover. So just know that that's where it actually goes, and I'll see if I can get that on the very end of this video on a 4100 series tractor I have in the shop. This is your oil filter, and again, whether it's on this side or the opposite side on some of the tractors, but it's always going to be on the side of the engine housing. All right, so that's part of that. Then we're going to have your hydraulic filter. This is the main hydraulic filter. It's at the bottom of the system, and one of the big things on this is when you spin that filter off, the fluid in the rear end is just going to start draining out, and there's no way to stop it other than putting the new filter on. So our recommendation is have your drain pan sitting on the ground underneath this filter. Get this filter loose, just so it's easy to spin by hand. It's got to be dripping just a little bit at that point. Have your new filter out of the box in your hand in a spot where you're not going to drop it on the ground and get it dirty, and then spin this old filter and just let it spin and drop right into the pan. Put the new filter on. No need to lube the gasket because there's oil coming out of the system. It's going to pre-lube that for you. Spin the new one on. You'll lose whatever oil was in that filter, plus maybe another filter's worth. So you're going to lose a couple of quarts, which is good. And if you don't have the new filter ready, you could lose the entire sump, which is 8 or 9 gallons of fluid, and then you're replacing the whole thing. On the other side, just up next to the fuel tank there, that is the hydrostatic filter. The original one from the factory is going to be black, and then you're going to put this new AE10 on. And if you bought your tractor from us, you've got the filters anyway, so you can go ahead and just find that in your bag and put that on. All right. Then after that, you're going to double check your hydraulic fluid, and the back of the tractor, that T-handle there, that is your dipstick into the rear housing that holds all the hydraulic fluid. And again, this is going to be an AW46 we use. You're going to want your 3-point hitch. If you have nothing on it, make your arms be flat, straight out the back of the tractor, not up, not all the way down, but right in the middle. Front loader is going to be lowered to the ground. Bucket curled back. We put it what we call the transport/storage position. That returns the proper amount of oil back to this sump so it can be measured correctly. If you have a backhoe on your tractor, same thing, you're going to put it in the storage position, so stabilizer legs up, boom all the way in, stick pulled all the way in, bucket curled all the way up. And that again, that puts the proper amount of fluid back into the sump. You're going to test your dipstick and just make sure it's full. You don't want to overfill it. You really don't want it underfilled. And the reason for that is an overfull sump, whether it's in your engine oil or transmission or hydraulics. If it's too full, it actually whips up air and it turns your oil into almost whipped cream, and then you get no lubricating efficiency from it at all. Okay. So let's see so we got engine oil, we have hydraulic oil and filters, those are done. Check parking brake adjustment, usually at 50 hours. That has not been compromised at all, but if need be, there is an adjustment at the back end of that cable. You're going to come along and you're going to check the torque on all the bolts. Right, these bolts brace up for the front and rear reinforcement. The loader brackets, all of these. You're going to find a torque spec page in your owner's manual. Right, there's some back there. Some of those are tough to get. You got to get an offset wrench to get to them. But again, you want to get a torque wrench and get those torque to the right specs. Now you've got hoses here. Right, you want to make sure all your hose clamps are tight. You're going to go through here. Anything on the exhaust, any rubber hoses with hose clamps, check those. Clamps on your exhaust system, on your air system. Just make sure they're snug. Don't over tighten them. Don't break them. You got to check your belt adjustments. Right, basically just overall general maintenance. Make sure everything has stayed tight. All right, even on the back side, got these couple of bolts right here. You're going to double check those, make sure they're still tight. Okay. You're going to check the torque on your wheel bolts. You're going to check your air pressure. You're going to make sure your radiator, right, if you've got this little screen in the front, you're going to make sure that's clean. I generally rinse some gentle water through the back of my radiator to make sure I flush out, because it sucks air from the front to the back. So I rinse it from the back to the front, try to push out any dust and dirt that built up in there, keep it clean. I'm going to check the coolant level, make sure that the coolant's fairly clean and that it's full. And not only do I check my bottle, I also check in the radiator itself to make sure that both are full, and just make sure that the engine is not hot when you pull the cap off the radiator, and you should warm the engine up before you do the engine oil. All right, if you have a clutch pedal, you're going to check for that. You're going to lubricate all your grease fittings, and then you're going to make sure that your switches all work, right? So if you get up out of your seat while trying to drive the tractor forward or backward, you want to make sure it shuts off. So it's just safety check switches. Now, grease fittings, we have a lot of questions on those. These are British standard pipe, so they're 1/8 by 28 threads per inch. So it's kind of an oddball size. They usually use a 10mm socket to take them out, but that's the key. LS says it's a 1/8 pipe. Well, 1/8 standard pipe here in the United States and 1/8 British pipe are one thread off. So they'll start, but they will not thread in cleanly. So make sure if you're using them, 1/8 British standard pipe, they're a straight fitting, and then all those fittings will go in. Keep them lubricated on a regular basis. If you break one off, get it out. If you ignore putting grease in some of these things, then they will seize up, and then you'll either have to clean the fitting out or swap it out with something else. So again, it's just look everything over. You're going to double check fluid in your front axle. So now up here on this one, we have the front housing, and we have a drain plug at the bottom, and we have a fill and level check at the top. And on our axle itself, same thing. We have there's our fill level. There's our check plug right there. So that's where we're going to open it up and make sure the oil is up to that level. And we're going to check our housings on this side. So that would be the drain plug. It would be our fill. So we want to make sure that the outdrives are all full, as well as the axle. If we have any issues with adjustments on loader valve, those would be here. For the most part, then we just make sure all the lights and everything else work, and we're good to go. I would suggest tightening up anything on the exhaust clamps. As you can see, this one's got some time and some hours on it. Air filter, you're going to inspect that. This has a 2-part air filter in it. So the outer one generally needs to be inspected and cleaned every 8 to 10 hours, even more if you're working in really dusty conditions. The inner part of the filter will probably last 4 times as long as the outer part. But clean air and clean fuel are the 2 most important things on your tractor. Now, fuel filters. Let's see if we can get a picture of that fuel filter in there. So at the 50-hour service, I do recommend pulling the fuel filter and inspecting the fuel that's in it. Now you can see there's a little wire there. There's a sensor for water that's in that filter. I would disconnect that plug. I would spin the entire filter off with the wire attached to the bottom. Okay. Then I would pull that bottom sensor out and drain the oil out of the filter into a clear container. I use old peanut butter jars because I want to see if there's dirt or water in that fuel. Now, one of the key things on replacing a fuel filter in one of these tractors is do not pre-fill the filter. All right, if you're putting a brand new filter on, or even you pulled the old one off, spin the filter on, leave it empty, make sure not a speck of dirt got into it, because whatever is inside that filter is already past the filtration element. So if you pour fuel into an empty filter and there was any dirt or water in that fuel, it's going directly to your injectors, and it's either going to clog them or blow them up. So do not pre-fill a fuel filter. These tractors are set up so that after the filter is on, you're going to turn your key just to the on position, not crank it, just to the on. Usually you'll hear a little electric fuel pump start to move fuel. And then on the top of these filters, there's a little button, and there's usually a little screw off to the side. You can crack the screw, and when you pump that button, fuel comes pumping into the filter, the air escapes out the top, then you can close that fitting, and your filter is now full. And then when you crank the tractor, it's going to pump the fuel into most of these now are common rail. It's going to pump the fuel into the common rail. Tractor's going to start. You do not have to bleed injectors. You don't even have to worry about that anymore. But if you pre-fill that filter and there's a speck of dirt in it, you're asking for trouble. And once you do that, you may have to start the tractor 2 or 3 times. It may sputter a little bit as it works the rest of the air out of the system, but due to the high pressure of the fuel rail, it will purge the air, and then the tractor will run fine. All right, I think that covers our 50-hour service.